I'm going to do a bit of Talmud, a section of Talmud. So this is not exactly an introductory course to the Talmud or to rabbinic writings. There will be a lot of introductory material, of course, it'll come up by nature, but as you know, that kind of stuff comes up all the time when I'm presenting a text. I try to put it into its historical context and its literary context. We are going to we're not starting at the beginning of the tractate, and I'll explain what tractate means in just a moment. The beginning of the tractate of brachot, of the particular section of the Talmud that deals with blessings and prayer. The beginning is fascinating, but it's really complex from a Talmudic point of view, from the way the literary structure. And it's kind of it's not an advanced level, but it's more of a level that it's not a good, I find it not to be a good place to begin. We're therefore beginning in the 9th chapter of the tractate of brachot. Okay, we've got, okay. No, I guess I should have done that beforehand. All right. Okay, we welcome Thomas, or is it Tom? How do we call you? Anyway, we had you before. I was afraid we lost you. In any case, we're just going to be looking at the 9th chapter, and depending on if we continue after the summer, which I'd like to do in theory, but we need to see how it goes. We're going to we're going to I don't know that we'll finish the 9th chapter, but we'll move ahead. And today we're doing just the initial literary level of the Talmud, which is the Mishnah. So I'm going to explain a lot of these things. The Hebrew Bible probably it wasn't canonized the same way that the Christian Bible was. It wasn't a group of people, as far as we know. We have no historical proof of this or indication that a group of rabbis got together and had a council like was done in the church in different times, different places. There is talk of the Council of Jamnia, which is Yavne in Hebrew, but that's kind of projecting from 19th century Jewish historians projecting onto early Judaism what they knew from the church, from church documents, from Christian documents. So, but the Hebrew Bible ends, the time that it ends is around the 2nd century. The latest book that we have is the 2nd century BCE, is the book of Daniel in the form that we have it now. And then there's a lot of literature in between that was written down that we have, that we call apocryphal literature. It's part of the Roman Catholic Bible because it was part of the Jewish Bible of Alexandria, the Alexandrian Egypt Jewish community. And in those particular works, they're written anywhere, this is way oversimplifying, but between the 2nd century BCE, 2nd century CE. And so there's a lot of literature that's in there that is wisdom literature. It's narrative prose. There is some legal work as well. Please, if you're there we go. Thank you. But there was oral literature all this time, and even during biblical times, it's pretty easy to show often that a section that we have in writing in the Hebrew Bible was oral beforehand. You know, the example that I used to always bring is from Book of Judges when we had Kushan Rishatayim Mi'aram Naharaim, right? This guy whose name was Kushan, he was twice evil. Kushan Rishatayim, twice evil from Aram Naharaim, from Aram between the two rivers. And that has the flavor of being something that was passed on orally for many generations. But the literature itself doesn't say this was oral and then we wrote it down, right? Sometimes it does. You have sometimes a particular passage will say it was written down by so and so. But the rabbinic writings, which are the section that we're going to begin with today, really are not written down until the 3rd century CE, the beginning of the 3rd century CE. And it starts, we usually say it starts with the Mishnah, but there are a number of different compositions. We're going to focus in on what's called the Mishnah. I mentioned it many times in our study of Acts together, those who were together for the interfaith study. It is a collection of oral traditions that were written down around 210, 220, 230, around then, in the northern part of Israel, in the Galilee. By this time, Jews were not allowed to live in Jerusalem. They were forced away by the Romans after the failed revolt of Bar Kokhba. They're living in the northern part, at least the rabbis. That's where they're working, the group of people we call rabbis. The first Mishnah, the first, or the earliest of the Mishnah, it quotes sages from even the 2nd century BCE. They're quoted, and that's in the chapters of the Fathers, they're quoted, but very quickly the Mishnah comes to the time of the first few centuries of the Common Era, in which different rabbis lived, different times, different places, but those traditions were edited together, very often as if there's a conversation. You get the feeling a conversation is going on in the study house when perhaps that wasn't possible because of time differences. We're going to get to that phenomena much later on steroids, even when we get to a Talmudic discussion. But the Mishnah is this collection of literature that becomes kind of the codification of law for that time. And the most interesting thing about it is that it rarely has just one bottom line of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do this, somebody else says you're supposed to do this, and somebody else says, well, you do this and you do that together, that kind of a thing. We're going to see some of that in our Mishnah today, in the section that we're going to do from Brachot. But before that, just as a brief introduction to the Mishnah, I lifted off of Wikipedia with giving them credit, their kind of breakdown. And I seem to remember a better one from someplace from years ago. Didn't find it online though. Didn't seem to have it I hope everyone can see that. I know the letters are a little bit small. So at the top, you see the 6 orders of the Mishnah. Madalena, can you let people in? Because I've got to kind of focus on this. Are you able to do that for us?
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks. If you could let people in. Thank you. Okay. So the 6 orders of the Mishnah, that is the 6 categories of life that have been divided, the laws of the people of Israel according to this group of rabbis. Now, it doesn't mean it's the norm, right? We understand it as the norm because that's the tradition that we received, and we'll talk more about that afterwards, or during this whole time of study together. And we did the same thing again in our interfaith study, and we did it in the book of Daniel. The later we get, closer to the destruction of the temple, the more literary sources there are, like Josephus and Philo, that can give us different aspects of what's going on. And we know, unlike the way I was raised, like in the yeshiva world, where we just think that what the rabbis say is what was, in a global way for the Jewish people in the land of Israel, it's not like that at all, of course. This is one voice amongst many. Some of them we have, some we don't have, and I hope to give voice to one of those almost lost voices from Qumran a little bit later on today. So let's look at these 6 orders of the Mishnah, and they're called Shisha Sidrei Mishnah in Hebrew. And I can't see anybody here, so if you've got a question, let's if you could wait till the question till the you know what, break in. If you have a question, just break in. Just shout, okay? Because I can't see your faces right now. So the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, the 6 orders of the Mishnah, they start from the left going to the right, okay? In this case, because it's in English, even though, okay. So the first section deals with agriculture, and the name of it literally means seeds, Zraim. And then you see under it the different names of the tractates. If you go to the Wikipedia of Mishnah, then you can click, of course, on each of these. Maybe it'll even work on the PDF that we sent you. It'll link to the Wikipedia articles about each of these tractates. A tractate is a smaller volume of the larger volume, which is called order. So if the order is, I don't know if you can see my hands right now. The order is this big. A tractate is this big. And in the order of agriculture, you have things like, I'm going to skip the first one, which we're going to do. You have things like Peah, which means the corner of the field, Demai, which means a crop in which you're not sure exactly if the right tithes have been taken from it at the right time. Kilaim, the mixture of different fruits and vegetables growing together. Shvi'it, the 7th year. Trumot, the gifts that go to the priests. Masrot, the tithes that go to the Levites. Maser Sheni, the second tithe that we learned about in Deuteronomy, those of us that learned together in Torah, in the Torah teachings a week and a half ago, that same tithe that Deuteronomy says the first 2 years, the years 1, 2, 4, and 5 of the 7-year cycle, you take it and you eat it in Jerusalem, and years 3 and 6 you give it to the poor, including the Levites. Challah, it doesn't mean the bread that you eat on Shabbat. It does mean, though, the reason that the bread you eat on Shabbat is called challah is the portion of dough which is given to the priest. Or la is the waiting of until the 4th year to eat from the fruit of a tree. After the 4th year, the fruit has been redeemed, or a ceremony's been done, then you can eat from any fruit tree. And bikurim is the bringing of the first fruits that we also learned about in Deuteronomy and Torah teachings a few weeks ago. A lot of intersectionality here with the different classes that many of you are doing, that we're studying together. And that's, to me, that's the beauty. The beauty of this is that we find ways to have everything kind of connect. I would like to say in an academic way, and not necessarily in a kind of just whatever free associative way, although that's also important. Those are the laws of agriculture. The next section is Moed, of festivals. Shabbat, the Sabbath. Eruvin are the different kinds of mixtures, legal loopholes that were made in order to make life easier for the Jews, that the rabbis made for the Jews, things having to do with Shabbat. We won't go into detail. Psachim, ostensibly, by the way, all this is ostensibly. All these sections, they deal with the topic in which they're entitled, but they also have other stuff, because the Talmud, unlike good pedagogy, I'm not giving myself as the example of bad pedagogy. Unlike good pedagogy, the Talmud often goes all over the place just by associative thinking, stream of consciousness kind of thing. So Psachim has to do with the laws of Passover. Shkalim has to do with giving the annual gift of a half of a shekel per a skull tax, I think you call it, that's what it's called in Hebrew, per person tax, and it's given and it's connected to Purim, because that's the time of year you do it. Yoma, the day, is Yom Kippur. Sukkah, the holiday of Sukkot, and things having to do with that. Beitzah has to do ostensibly with cooking on, or things, the laws of Yom Tov, of the festivals, as opposed to the laws of Shabbat. They're a little bit easier, especially when it comes to food. Rosh Hashanah kind of goes without saying. Ta'anit, the different fast days of the year, not so much the official fast days, but the laws of when a public fast was called because there was no rain. Megillah has to do with Purim, the laws of Purim, but also has lots of laws having to do with Torah scrolls and things like that. Moed Katan has to do with the intermediate days of the holidays of the festivals, and also laws of mourning got included in that as well. Chagiga, and I'm leaving out lots of other things. Chagiga, different certain offerings that were brought on those festivals. Nashim is women. It's not a tractate. It's not a woman's handbook. It is a handbook for men and how they deal with women. That's the best way I could put it. It starts with the laws of Yivamot, the levirate marriage, that you may remember that if two brothers, one brother dies without having children, then the second brother is to take the widow to raise a family in the name of his deceased brother. To both marriage documents, the prenuptial agreements that were made, and all the ins and outs of that, very complicated stuff. Nidarim are vows, and again, because the Torah speaks specifically about vows that women give and men can get them out of it, kind of a thing. Nazir, the law of the Nazirite. Not going to talk about why the connection to women is here, but you can see right away. Sotah, for those that we studied Sotah together, the woman who's suspected of adultery is something that might lead people, seeing that ceremony, say the rabbis, is something that would lead people to perhaps take a vow of being Nazirim. And a Nazir is not a celibate monk. A Nazir, although that's what we say in modern Hebrew, a Nazir is a monk who's often celibate. A Nazirah would be a sister in an order in modern Hebrew, or in medieval Hebrew, maybe perhaps, but certainly in modern Hebrew. But Nazir, the Nazirite vow was specifically not to drink wine or anything from grapes, eat anything from grapes, not to cut one's hair, not to become impure. Gitin are divorce documents, and Kiddushin are the laws of matrimony. Nizikin, damages. The three just mean the first gate, the middle gate, and the last gate of what was once a very large tractate called Nizikin, which is torts, all sorts of damages and things like that, lending money, property rights. Sanhedrin are the laws of the court, the great court, the same Sanhedrin that appears in the New Testament. And those are interesting texts to use when we look at some of the texts in Sanhedrin that talk about how that court worked. Makot are laws of lashes. Shavuot are oaths taken before the court. Eduyot are the laws of testimony. Avodah zarah is idolatry. Avot are the traditions of the fathers. And this is the section that I quoted before. This is where we have the oldest traditions from the Mishnah. And it's always kind of a question, what is this doing here? We're going to ask the same question about brachot, why it's in the first section. Avot is really wisdom literature, the wisdom of our fathers. Horayot is a really interesting tractate that deals with what happens when the court or the rabbis or the leadership of any kind makes a mistake, how it's undone. I'm not going to go through all the different types of kodshim, of sacrifices, but that's what it is. Offerings from the time of the temple. Tohorot are all the laws that have to do with purity and impurity. The one I'm going to just highlight here is Nida, and that's one that is studied a lot because it has to do with how married couple function from as far as the monthly period is concerned and going to the mikveh. So that's why that's a particularly interesting one that is studied. And over here, if we go to Chulin in the Kodshim, Chulin actually means the opposite. All the kinds of meat that you eat that are not sacrificial. And that's where many of the laws of eating kosher are found. Last thing I'm going to say before I take a breath and go back to the gallery view so that we can have a little discussion is the question, of course, what is Avot doing here? And the usual answer is, no, we had nowhere else to put it. So that's where we put it. It's not a good answer. I don't know. It's not laws, it's wisdom literature. And then the one that particularly concerns us is brachot. What is brachot? That is literally blessings, but meaning prayers and blessings and the recitation of Shema, and so many other things as we're going to see. What is that doing in the Seder of Zra'im, in the first of these orders? What's it doing amongst the agricultural laws? Let's stop share and okay. I understand a bit overwhelming, and we'll look at it. You have that document to look at all the time, and if you want to play with it, you can see, that's how the Mishnah say beginning of the 3rd century CE. That is how these oral traditions were ordered by whomever. It's often attributed to Rabbi Judah the Prince. We don't really know, but it certainly wasn't him himself. He had a team of people, but that is like the earliest piece is considered to be, it's not exactly, but it's considered to be the earliest piece of rabbinic literature that we have written on. And all this together is called the oral law or the oral Torah, Torah Shebal Peh, ironically, because it was, right? This and what comes afterwards, as opposed to Torah Shebichtav, the written law, which is the Torah itself. Ella. Please unmute. Still don't have you unmuted.
Okay, if one wants to get the Mishnah, is it 6? Is it all combined in one big book, or is it 6 different books?
There is one volume. I think it's Danby. I think I have it. It's an old British, I believe, translation, and I think it's in one rather large, fat book. You can get everything online today, but usually the editions that come out today are in at least 6 volumes, because if there's commentary to it, it takes up a lot. But you could get a 6-volume set, and it's a lovely bar mitzvah gift here, or bat mitzvah gift, right? We've many times gotten that, yeah. And there are various commentaries to the Mishnah, and we're going to talk about in a second the word Gemara, and then the term that I use all the time, Talmud. But yeah, you can buy this separately in six volumes, or even in one volume, and there's even one set that is something like 25 volumes by Jacob Neusner, whatever, or even more. Yeah.
David,
yes, please go ahead.
I think I saw, and I may be mistaken, the way. What is the Hebrew for the way?
The Hebrew for the way is haderech, but in what context did you see it?
I thought I saw it in the text, but I may be mistaken.
Oh, in the text the text that we sent out today that we're going to get to in a minute? Oh, it would probably be derech, but I have to see. That's why I left the Hebrew on the page this time, right? But I'll double check. Yeah, usually it would be haderech. Yeah. Okay. We kind of jumped into this, but there's some Steve and as well. Is it Tom or Thomas?
Tom.
Okay. So Tom, you were part of the Acts group as well, correct?
Yes, I was.
Right. So I guess everybody here kind of knows each other, not necessarily from the same time. Don, it's great to have you on this in this particular study group, and so there's people here from Palm Springs, from Texas, from Mauritius, from France, and Chicago, different places, Santa Barbara, or north of Santa Barbara, and I'm sure I've left somebody out. But I think more or less we're all kind of used to this kind of back and forth. So the rules of the game are, if you want to say something, and I can't see you do this, or I don't always see that raised hand in the corner, so just speak out the way that Tom did right now, okay? Anything else about this? And this is just really kind of background. It's not that crucial to understand what we're doing today, but it's one of my goals, is for people to understand, where does this fit in the timeline, in the context of rabbinic literature. Okay, one more thing I will say, and this goes back to the point of when I was in seminary, when I was in yeshiva, it was clear this was Jewish literature. What else was there? There were some Jewish literatures that were thrown out, like we kind of knew about the apocryphal books, but as far as we knew, well, they weren't approved by the rabbis, the real rabbis, the authoritative rabbis of the land of Israel. Of course, with years, Bible department, Hebrew University, I understood things were very, very different. And then in recent years, especially in light of the study that many of us have done together, the interfaith study of the New Testament, in recent years, I've come to learn that this idea of the parting of ways that used to be used by historians, that there really was no parting of ways one particular moment when Christianity and Judaism parted ways. There was a big chunk of time, maybe even 200-300 years, in which there continued to be groups of Jews who practiced Judaism and wrote Jewish literature, but included a belief in Christ in that. They weren't what we call today Messianic Jews. It was his own organic, natural thing, and it went on for longer than church scholars would have had people think, and even in the 20th century, and not just church scholars, Jewish scholars of Jewish history as well. And if anybody's interested in that separately, write me an email. I'll tell you what I've been reading about that. And I say this because I want us to make sure that while the normative, what we call normative Judaism, focuses on this as a prime central text, we really don't know how many people of the Jewish people this reflected in reality. And doesn't mean it's less important to learn, but it means that we should be open to other possibilities and ideas. The last thing I will say about this is, we're working from certain manuscripts. The printed editions we have are from, and I'm not an expert at the manuscripts of Talmud, but who do we have? This
Sue.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. Is that we may have something that is said in the text that we have, and then we may find in our study that the Talmud itself, which I'm going to talk about in a second, the Gemara says, oh, no, that's not how our tradition is. We read it exactly the opposite. And that's in the text that we have of one manuscript, which became the printed editions that we all use. But sometimes you have manuscripts that say multiple things about the same sentence comes out different ways, especially when Rabbi so-and-so says this, another manuscript says Rabbi so-and-so said that. And it makes it really, really confusing, right? More confusing than looking at different texts of the New Testament in Greek, different families of manuscripts, or comparing between the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Masoretic text when we look at Hebrew Bible as well. To me, it's fascinating, but it can be overwhelming. But it's a reality. What I'm saying, we should use these as reality checks. We should always take a really deep breath when we say, no, that's not what the text says. We don't really know. We have a tradition of what some people felt the text said. We'll all make up our minds what we like, right? What we believe in, what makes us feel good, what challenges us, right? But we need to stay away. I would like us to stay away from, no, that's not what the text says, okay? All right, and we'll see the rabbis do that all the time. Yes, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Rabbi David, so you said this was the Jewish literature. It's not like the same. This is all new to me. So I think of canon for scripture, and it ended. Is there a period of time where they said Jewish literature, it stops here, we're not adding anymore, or is it ongoing today?
That's a really good question. What becomes canon in Judaism? There's whole university courses that are given on that. So I'm not really qualified to say the different ways. I can tell you what's considered to be canon in certain circles of Judaism, right? Just like in the church, right? You could have Roman Catholics will tell you the canon of biblical books is different than what the Protestants will say, right? Because of Luther, and not just Luther, other things as well. And Mormons will come and tell you something very different, won't they? Right? From a Jewish point of view, I'd like to talk about maybe the rabbinic canon as was received throughout the Middle Ages, and also really kind of dangerous because we're going to be studying this leads me to the next point of the introduction. We're going to be studying the Babylonian Talmud. There is another Talmud, which is called the Jerusalem Talmud, even though it was not put together in Jerusalem. Jerusalem was really kind of a title for anything that came from Palestine or the land of Israel. And Palestine is a pre-political term, pre-20th century political term, which is why it was used. Palestine, ancient Palestine, is synonymous with the land of Israel in our way of looking at history, not in a Palestinian way, a modern day Palestinian way. But the Talmud of the land of Israel is somewhat, some said it is a Venn diagram, but it's only partially overlapping. And it was the Babylonian Talmud that went on for all sorts of historical reasons to be influential on the entire Mediterranean and everything that went up and down from that where Jews were living, right? The whole area. It was the Babylonian Talmud, except for Egypt. Egypt was more affected by the traditions of the land of Israel, and Rome. Rome was affected directly for many reasons, but Rome was affected directly by the laws of the land of Israel. I'm talking about like the 10th century. I'm just throwing out there 10th, 11th century. And so that's a really interesting thing as well. So even in rabbinic literature, the norm is something, it's very Babylonian centered as opposed to land of Israel centered. Okay, what happens when somebody writes a book today? There is an informal social kind of canonization, right? If Rick Warren puts out a book, it's almost canon. It's kind of a canon, right? In some circles, right? Because he is a writer. He's a very understandable writer. He's a charismatic figure. He has a message very clear, whatever, as opposed to some other evangelical who's writing in Wyoming in the mountains, happens to publish a book and nobody knows about it. So that's not exactly. I know that's not what you mean by canon, but what we don't have that simple line of history as you do in the church, and even then I'm guessing it was more messy than it's reported to be, of a council of bishops coming together and say, we're going to vote on it. This is in, this is out. There are echoes of those conversations in very, very small, very, very few places in Talmudic literature, There's an argument over Song of Songs. After all, it is kind of almost pornographic, erotic love poetry. There seems to be a discussion maybe over the book of Esther, because it happens outside the land of Israel. It's late. One of the things that we look at to judge whether books are canonical or not were they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran. And it happens to be that no scroll, no fragment of a scroll has been found to this date from the book of Esther. Now, does that mean that the people of Qumran didn't accept the book of Esther? Well, some historians would like to say that, because it is kind of a strange book. God is not mentioned in that book at all. It's got an uncle and a niece, and possibly even two married people who, and she marries the king, who's a non-Jewish king. It's such a problematic book from a Jewish traditional point of view. But then again, we have a rule in academic study that you don't, arguments from silence, right? You have to be very careful about making an argument for something that's not there. It could be that particular scroll, fell into a ditch or something, or whatever. No, they all fell into ditches. Okay. All right. So it's no. In other words, the answer to the question is no, we don't have that. Okay. Anything else before we go on? Okay.
David,
Yes.
I'm trying to imagine what these study centers look like. And I'm sure you can't answer that, but the thing that comes to my mind is sort of when I watch the Devil's Arithmetic, and they show this building where the study took place, and maybe the worship. But I'm just curious, is there any knowledge of what the rooms look like where the study took place?
Yeah, there's a little bit of knowledge, because it was the same building. I think we can pretty much say that in the circles of these rabbis, the Beit Midrash, the house of study, was also the Beit Knesset, the synagogue. It was the same building. And there are relics, right? Not relics is not the right word. There are there's archaeological evidence, very rich, of synagogues at different times in the later rabbinic period, not so much the 3rd century. There might be one from the 3rd century, but most of them are 5th, 6th century in the land of Israel, and also outside of the land in the diaspora. And there's, and then there's talk, and I don't remember if it's about the Beit Midrash. A lot of work has been done. There's a book on it, in fact, of what this stuff looked like in Babylonia, right? In Babylon, according to the Babylonian Talmud, and there were benches, and according to where you were in the stature of students, your vetik, your seniority, or I guess, or how smart you were, you got to sit in the front benches, right, as opposed to the schleppers that were in the back, right? And so those are benches. And another section, it says that everybody sat at the feet of the rabbis. So then you imagine the rabbi is sitting, is giving off his Torah from a chair, and they're all sitting on the ground. But maybe that's a poetic mention. So we don't know exactly, and let's be on the lookout for that, if there's something we can tell. What we do know is that there's a literary invention that the invention of the Mishnah and the Talmud is to give us the impression, certainly from the Talmud, that these people are sitting together in one room and while it's happening. While when we look at the dates and the places, is sometimes you've got a rabbi from the 1st century is answered by a rabbi in the 2nd century, who is debated by a rabbi in the 3rd century, and then 3 rabbis in the 4th and 5th century, or not even in the land of Israel, they're in Babylonia, are arguing with them, right? The image that I like to use, because I'm a Trekkie, is the 3-dimensional Spock, 3-dimensional chess that Spock used to play.
It's great.
Yeah. All right. So brachot, what's that doing in the tractate of agriculture, right? It's not about agriculture. We kind of understand why the first tractate would be agriculture, because you got to eat, right? Well, it's kind of like the key to being a Jew in the rabbinic mind, right? In the rabbinic mind, the rabbis, they rewrote the religion of Israel. They had to kind of reinvent it, not completely, but in many ways, in the same way that Christianity was a rewriting, a reinvention of the religion of Israel, right? In a different, slightly different direction, and not an entirely different direction, because Jesus was part of this group of rabbis of this tradition who spoke about these different issues, not doing what's written in the Torah exactly, but how it would the reality that we see in the Gospels, especially reflects, or in Acts as well, reflects not exactly a practice of the Bible itself, but what happened afterwards, or what happened aside from after the Torah itself was canonized, and again canonized in the loose term, in the loose way of using it. And so the central to rabbinic understanding of what it means to be a Jew is prayer, as opposed to what did it mean while the temple was still standing until 70 CE? It was what was happening in the temple was the worship. There were no organized prayers in the same way we know them today, 3 prayers a day, this whole formula of blessings. Maybe they were there, but they're not reflected in the Hebrew Bible. There are prayers in the Hebrew Bible, but they're personal prayers, right? They're not organizational. There's a few pieces of liturgy in Deuteronomy. We saw them like in chapter 25, I think, having to do with bringing of the first fruits. There is a piece of liturgy there. There's a piece of liturgy in bringing the tithes, giving the tithes to the poor. But by and large, we don't have a lot. Even Shema Yisrael, which is going to become a focal point of Jewish liturgy, Hear, O Israel, Lord is God, Lord is one, is not presented as such as a piece of liturgy. It's not presented as, this is what you shall say. There is a piece of liturgy that says, and this is what the priest shall say, and then the 3-tiered priestly blessing, right? Yivarecha Adonai v'yishmecha, may the Lord bless you and keep you. But basically, worship has to do with the priest, supported by the Levites, who are making offerings in the temple itself. The whole laws of purity and impurity around that, and the meeting point of the people of hoi polloi, the masses, and this elite that were having this vertical relationship, vertical relationship with God. The meeting point, the temple, is very, very governed by impurity and impurity, and people bringing offerings and things like that. So it's like the masses kind of come close from time to time, routine, and really the people who are ongoing with their worship, in the sphere of worship with God, are just the priests supported by the Levites, and even not all the priests, right? There only so many could be there at one time. There is another vertical relationship that we know from the Hebrew Bible, and that's prophecy. That's not worship, but that's social change. That's the governing of the people in that particular way of social justice. Another vertical relationship that never really quite worked out is the kingship, or the kings, right? And if you think of all this, again, to our Christian friends here, those of us who are students of Christianity, that's the direction that Jesus and Paul took Judaism as well, right? To make up for the destruction of the temple. There's no more focal point of sacrifices in that world, and priests, using priests in a different way than what developed, although that's an interesting topic. Or if Jesus was very much about unpriesthood, why did it develop the priesthood? We'll leave that for the Roman Catholics to decide. Claire, you give us a report next week what you decided. And
David, was the Amidah, were
Yeah.
those prayers of thanksgiving? I see remnants of those in this passage in the Talmud.
Yeah. So the Amidah is the standing prayer, and that is talked about. The laws of the Amidah are talked about in Brachot, not in the section that we're going to do, but in an earlier section. Amidah, what we call also the Shmoneh Esrei, mistakenly, because it has 19 blessings, at least it did in Babylonia. The 3-time-a-day prayer, morning, afternoon, and evening. Yes, they're mostly Thanksgiving. There are requests on weekdays, but not on the Sabbath. But you're bringing us into the text that we're going to look at today, and I don't know that we're going to finish it, but I've gone on too much about it for an introduction right now. So why don't we get to the text then? Okay. Does anybody need the text? Does everybody have it? Great. Okay, then I'll take out my page. Do you need it, Sasha? So.
Since 1:40 something.
Okay, so the thing, we only really talked about the Mishnah today and brushed up on what's going to be called the Gemara. Mishnah means to repeat something by learning. Gemara means also to learn. They're the same, but it's in Aramaic. Today, we're only going to be seeing Hebrew. There's a lot more Hebrew in this chapter than other chapters or other parts of Talmud, which is why I originally chose to teach this. Which is why I've gravitated towards teaching this over the years, most of my teaching being in Israel. And we're only going to see the Mishnah. And a typical page of Talmud, you'll have a section of the Mishnah, and then a discussion afterwards by the later rabbis in Babylonia, except for it's an editor who included rabbis in the land of Israel and in Babylonia, and we'll get to that, but not today. Today, we're just looking at the Mishnah, and this is kind of unique in the Talmud, such a long section of Mishnah that's going to be talked about. And the overall topic here are blessings, or one might say praisings. We will have to talk about translation in the next few minutes. Or what you mentioned, words of thanksgiving. Well, thanksgiving, but not exactly, as we're going to see. So let's let the text teach for itself. We're going to do speak for itself, and let's do a paragraph at a time. These are so a chapter of Mishnah is broken down into sub-chapters, which confusingly are called Mishnayot, Mishnahs. So why don't we go ahead? Donna, would you like to read the beginning of the Mishnah for us?
Yes, hang on. Oh, I'm there. Okay, yeah, there's some background. They're cutting
We're
logs.
fine. We're fine. We hear you
Okay.
great.
One who sees a place where miracles occurred on Israel's behalf recites, "Blessed who performed miracles for our forefathers in this place." One who sees a place from which idolatry was eradicated recites, "Blessed who eradicated idolatry from our land."
Okay, so before we get to the content itself, there's an issue of form we need to talk about. The Talmud, the way that we received it in manuscripts and the way it's printed, is very careful not to use God's name. We'll never see Yud He Vav He, right? Which is pronounced Yahweh or Jehovah or different things in English. That's God's holy name. That was reserved for prayer. Or if you're quoting a full verse from the halachas, and again, in my mind, sometimes all of Jewish law is compressed to what's done in the 20th century when I learned these things more than the 21st century, and what stayed in my mind as opposed to what's Talmudic. And so the Bible is very careful about not using God's name in vain, right? So what does that mean in vain? Though some people, the taboo of uttering God's name. So the rabbis, or the tradition of written recording of the Talmudic literature is very careful not to use Adonai, and Hashem wasn't invented yet, that some people know of. And so they use, very often you have the term HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what we see often in English translations. The Holy One, blessed is He, or I will write the praised Holy One instead. Now, in this case, it's clear to everybody that this is not the blessing. This is an abbreviation of what the blessing will be, which I will say right now. The blessings always start with Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Almost all blessings start with that formula. Baruch, which has been translated blessed, but I would rather translate praised, and I'll say why in a second. Praised are you, Adonai, ruler, master, something like that, of the universe. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. And then you have things that you fill out afterwards. So many people know Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who has brought the bread out from the earth, right? We say before we eat bread. Or Borei pri hagafen, they come up, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei pri hagafen, the creator of the vine. That is like a classic blessing for, we call it Birkot Nehenim, the blessings that we do out of thanksgiving for some pleasure that we have received. Pleasure, benefit is a better word, benefit. And that has its own section in the Talmud, right? A different chapter, not in this chapter. And then there's a section, the blessings that you say, or a type of blessings that you say before you're about to do a mitzvah, a particular commandment. So if I'm about to put on my talit, my prayer shawl, I'll go Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, the same formula. Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to wrap ourselves with tzitzit, with fringes. I'll kiss here, I'll wrap it around my head, and I will wrap myself totally. And doing, to me, that's the mitzvah. That's the Talmudic understanding of what the commandment is. We do the same thing over lighting candles for Shabbat or for Hanukkah, etc. So you have the blessings for benefit of the individual, blessings for doing a commandment, and then there are these blessings. And our chapter is going to do with these blessings, and these are environmental awareness blessings, I'm going to call them, right? How, yeah, is that the term? Yeah, environmental. I don't mean the, ecology. I mean, knowing your surrounding. What's that called? Well, it is a form of mindfulness. Yes, it's part of, but so is saying a blessing over eating or smelling. By the way, smelling also is part of the benefits, but it's situational awareness. That's what I'm looking for. These are blessings of situational awareness, right? And exactly what constitutes a situation, and what is the point here? To connect the individual with God, right? No less than that, folks. No less than connecting the individual. I won't say everywhere, and I won't say anytime, but almost everywhere and almost anytime. And we'll see the exceptions, and the exceptions actually prove that that's what it's about, right? If I'm not allowed to say a blessing in the outhouse, in the bathroom, in the shower, or in the next to the garbage dump, well, that it's not that God doesn't exist there. It has me think about, but is it proper? Is it respectful to talk about God in that place? Okay.
Are those
Yes, go ahead.
Are those the blessings that you say in the morning?
Some of those blessings are Birkot HaShachar, are situational. Yeah. Some of them, though, are Thanksgiving. If we say it mixed, so the truth is, the blessings of the morning are in this chapter. Don't know if we'll get there far. I hope so, because that's one of my favorite sections, right? So the morning blessings, Birkot HaShachar, for those that know what the morning prayer looks like. So now we get to our Mishnah. So basically, what the Mishnah is saying, the oral tradition was one who sees a place, and that's the melody you use when you do Mishnah, right? At least in the Ashkenazic world, right? One who sees a place where miracles occurred in on Israel's behalf recites Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asa nisim b'makom hazeh, something like that. Okay, it doesn't give. We don't exactly the whole formula, but it says you have to give a blessing with whatever the formula that they all knew. Or was liquid, it was fluid from place to place, right? We think in terms of liturgy being set, same thing in the church world, right? Well, somebody said it. Before that, it was more fluid, depending on where you are. So, there may be a variation, certainly there's a variation between different Protestant churches, right? Of what exactly the liturgy looked. Let's take our Father, right? In the United States, I don't know if you're aware of this, Claire or Corinne, in American churches, at least the ones that I frequent today, you have a very complex Our Father printed in the program, right? It has sometimes Our Father / Mother / Creator / there's a lot of again, those are the kind of churches I find myself in, I understand, but still in between different denominations, certainly that's the case. The same thing is true today, even in the Orthodox world, besides modern changes made in Judaism, formulae and the exact liturgy is different between Sfarad and Sfaradim. There's two groups that are not Ashkenazic, and Ashkenazim, and the Hasidic Jews did something like the Sfaradim for different reasons, for Kabbalistic reasons. There are different, even in Orthodoxy, there's various changes in liturgy. They're not huge, but they're from word to word. So we have to expect that, of course, in this time, when these prayers were in the process of being canonized, and again, I use it in a looser way, that there were different words. The idea here, though, is what's most important. When you get to a place where there was a miracle, then you say it. Now, what would come to mind? The Talmud's going to discuss this at great length, but when I ask you what comes to mind when you get to a place where a miracle occurred, what would you be thinking of?
A rainbow.
Okay, so so is a rainbow a miracle? Now we are going to get to rainbow is mentioned here, but is a rainbow a miracle? Because what's the definition of a miracle, Eileen?
Something unexpected caused by nature,
Or maybe supernatural.
supernatural,
Maybe something that which is actually not you and I explained it by nature, right?
right?
But when the Torah says that the people of Israel were escaping from the Egyptian army behind them, and the water was in front of them, and it stood up like this, and a wall on this side, and a wall on that side, the description, not talking about what happened or what didn't happen, the description is supernatural.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Right? It's not so for instance, one might think that if you happen and it's I because I've read ahead, I'm sorry, I apologize. Sid is usually the one who read ahead. Sid couldn't read ahead today because he was with it at his grandson's graduation online. But if you read ahead in the Talmud itself, not in the sheet that I gave you, you'd see that there's a discussion about where are you in the land of Israel, the greater land of Israel, where something that happened from biblical narrative that we know there's a miracle. That's one thing. Then you get to a place where there was once a temple, and this is the rabbis are saying this under Roman rule, and Roman culture was thought to be idolatrous, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we call pagan culture, which is a complicated term, I'm told. And so let's say there's a place that there was a temple to Aphrodite, just or to Zeus or whoever it was, and I know probably mixing up Greek and Roman gods, and then flood came, washed the whole thing away. The rabbis walked by. Oh, thank God that house of idolatry has been destroyed, right? Just giving or whatever, right? Now, one of the questions that will come up in the Talmud, of course, is what is idolatry, and how is Christianity, for instance, identified? And that's a huge debate within Orthodox Judaism, not within liberal Judaism, within Orthodox Judaism, because of the Trinity. But in these times, they're reflecting their background. There might be some polemics in Talmudic literature. There are against Christianity, but I don't think so in the Mishnah. There may be, but not in this material, right? So this is not talking, although I'm sure there was some rabbi at some point that said, yes, when they built a church in a particular place in the land of Israel and it was destroyed, then that's what we did. We said a blessing there. That wasn't the case. That Christianity at this time is not considered, any form of it that would have overlapped with the rabbis is not considered to be idolatry. Okay. Yes. Yes, Donna. Unmute, please.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about the flood with Noah as a miracle.
So where would you say, first of all, miracles are usually for the good of people.
Oh, not the destruction of people.
Yeah. But what if you happened upon Mount Ararat? Assuming you knew where it was.
Yeah, with the tablets. Yeah.
No, not the tablets. Mount Ararat is where Noah's Ark rested, and there's a place in Armenia that I was even thinking of going to a conference there a few years ago. Anyway, in Ararat. No, but Mount Sinai, for instance. So those would be questions. Let's see what happens in the Talmud. The Talmud would answer that question as to what it is. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next section. Steve Byrne, you want to read?
Sure. Okay. For Zykan and Zeva, for thunder, winds, and lightning, one recites, blessed, whose strength and power fill the world. For mountains, hills, seas, rivers, and deserts, one recites, blessed, author of creation. Rabbi Yehuda says, one who sees the great sea recites, blessed, who made the great sea, and only when he sees it intermittently.
Okay, so Zekin and Zvod were left in this translation transliterated because it becomes a discussion in the Talmud later on what these terms mean. They're not as clear as the other terms, but usually one would probably translate them as Zekin are comets and Zvaot are earthquakes. And they seem to be things that are missing from this thing. These are not miraculous or supernatural events. This is more in line of what Eileen was saying beforehand, right? These are things that stand out. The first ones are. And the truth of the matter is, I do, Sasha does, when we are in a thunderstorm and we see lightning and thunder, we say actually two different blessings. And the Talmud will go into differently, but these are things that apply to many, many Jews, not just Orthodox Jews today, less so the first two blessings. Although let's let the Talmud influence what we're going to practice ourselves. And I forgot to say that when blessed here, the translation that's used here, that I would rather translate it praise, because although this is a theological, philosophical debate, which is raised especially in Hasidic literature and therefore raised by Abraham Joshua Heschel in his literature, is can we really bless God? We want God to bless us. But blessing to me infers a kind of a power dynamic, right? I can bless someone else. But can I bless God? And the same word, baruch, it actually comes from the word ni, berech. And it means to get down on your knees, which means to praise. Not supplication, but to show the power dynamic that you're down here. And that's why I tend not to translate blessed. Sometimes I leave it like here, and in different prayer books, because so much of what I do today is cut and paste from other things. Sometimes it's left, but I would usually say praised. We give thanks, as I do in the morning prayer that we do together, we give thanks and we give praise too, right? So that's what's in that word blessed there, right? But that goes for everything that's said here. So you've got these things which are more or less natural things that happen on a stormy day. And then you have, these things that happen on a stormy day. Then you have things that are more or less every day, the hills and the valleys, whatever. So what, do you keep saying everywhere you look, do you keep saying blessings? Well, I think the idea is if you're impressed by what you see, yes. So if you are up you've taken the tramway up to the top of San Jacinto Mountain there, and you're looking down the Coachella Valley, then yeah. If you're filled with awe from a great viewpoint, or you're at that rock that's near Fredericksburg, that's near Hill Country that I've been to, I forgot what it's called, that where you take hikes around, this rock in the middle of nowhere, or if you're looking out at the view from Taizé, or whatever it might be in your eyes, yeah, why not say a blessing? Now, I don't say that people do it often because they're afraid of it getting a little bit too cheap by if you do it too much, right? But that's why in the end, Jewish law emphasized what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yehuda has a slightly different take, right? He says, and some people say he says this about everything. When you see the Great Sea, which he means the Mediterranean, you say, I want to give praise and thanks to God who created the Great Sea. Now, that's because most people didn't see the sea on a regular basis, right? They didn't live next to there. Those living there lived inland, not like you're living in Mauritius where the sea is all around you. And then he says, and that's, by the way, that's only if you only see it from time to time. That will later probably become in different law books, Jewish codices will become 100 days, right? Okay. So we're at the time. Would folks want to continue, or should we leave it at 11?
I think we should stop.
And Megan, do you have to get to the other Talmud class? Okay. All right. All right, we'll go on a few more minutes. Let's see. Let's go on if we can. Richard, go ahead.
So we're up to for rain. For rain and good tidings, one recites praised, who is good, and who is good.
Now,
For
who does
bad
good?
What's that?
Who is good and who does good.
Oh, yeah, who is good and who does good. For bad tidings, one recites, blessed the true judge. Oh, no, praise the true judge. If
Okay.
one built a new house or purchased a new vessel, they recite, praised, who has given us life. One recites a blessing for the bad, justice for the good. Similarly, the good, justice for the bad.
Okay, so two blessings here. Does anybody recognize what they are and how we use them today? Go ahead, Sid.
Yeah, first, the one that stands out to me is says, "Blessed the true judge, Baruch Dayan Emet."
And what situation do we say that?
never say Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam, but Dayan Emet.
Well, first of all, I will correct you. We do, and you probably have. You just don't remember, but I'll tell you in a second. But what's the situation?
When somebody dies.
If somebody dies,
Right. So our custom is to say it in the shortened form without God's name when we hear somebody dies. But when mourners are tearing kriya, when they tear their clothes or the black ribbon here in the United States at the time of a funeral, then, or when they actually, if they're close mourners and they hear that news that their father, their mother, somebody has died, you're supposed to say it with Shem Malchut, with God's name. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam dayan haemet.
learn something new every day.
At a funeral, pay attention next time you're at a funeral. May that not be very often. Okay. And
Yes,
so
I agree.
that's one blessing. But and how about what's the other blessing that perhaps somebody recognizes here, especially those that can read the Hebrew in the middle of the second line?
Shechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Right, who has given us life, sustained us, and brought us to this time. That to me is the quintessential blessing of mindfulness, right? I am at this moment of time, I give thanks because something particular is happening. In the Jewish tradition, again, this is not in the Mishnah itself. The Mishnah says on when you buy something new, like new pots and pans, new clothes are included in the word kelim as well. New clothes, in fact, I think it's probably clothes here. A new house, extended today to a new car, all sorts of new things, but not shoes. Shoes in Jewish law, shoes for some reason were not included.
What about a birth? A birth of a baby?
A birth goes on, actually is a different blessing. A birth, and again, these are things that will be talked about in the Talmud. A birth is usually a blessing when one hears good news, hatov ametim, who does good, is good and does good. But because the good news is that's when you hear for a son in Orthodox law, you say that blessing. But if it's a girl, you say shechianu, right? That's the second best blessing, right? But yeah, we say at special occasions. We also say it for festivals, right after Kiddush or lighting the candles for the first day of a festival, for instance.
Rabbi?
Okay. Yes.
Oh, was I wrong? I kind of said it silently to myself when we started this class this morning, because it was the first time that I've experienced Talmud.
Well, then let's say it together and we'll end with that. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechianu v'gianu lazman hazeh. We give praise, we give thanks to the Holy One. However we understand the Holy One, we give thanks and we give praise that we have arrived at this moment together with the miracle of internet and Zoom and of being in so many different places together at one time. And we'll leave the Mishnah at this point. We'll continue with this. So please don't throw these out. Keep them. Keep this one. We'll continue with this and do the other side and hopefully begin the actual Gemara or the later stage of the Talmud.
Rabbi, can you quickly define the difference in terms between Talmud and Gemara and Mishnah?
Yes. So Mishnah is the older section, which in a regular edition of the Talmud, I don't have a regular edition. Now I'll show you next time a Vilna edition, which used to be the standard. But the Mishnah, which is the older tradition, is then discussed in the Gemara. Mishnah, Gemara mean the same thing. This Mishnah in Hebrew, Gemara is in Aramaic. The further discussion, and that together is called the Talmud.
Oh, got it. Okay, that's what I thought. I don't want to be sure. Yeah. I have a picture, I've seen it, so I have a picture of what it looks, the writing in the middle and there's all the writing around it, yeah.
Right, and we'll take a look at that at some point when there's something particularly interesting with one of the commentaries. And I'll try to use each time to do something a little bit beyond the text itself, which I tried to do today as well. Okay, then, so we're going to be at 10 o'clock throughout the summer. There may be a week or two that we have to give it a break. I'm traveling actually in 2 weeks. I don't know that I can make, I think the flight is early, but I'll have to see. But just keep track of everything, and we'll be recording all these sessions. So if you miss one, you can make it up. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Have a good weekend. Shabbat shalom.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shalom.
Thank you, Magdalena.
You're welcome.